Yesterday, the Chancellor of the Exchequer put a proposal out to say there's going to be a £39 billion contribution towards social and affordable housing. Jeremy Vine, on his BBC Radio 2 show, put out the question to the nation to see how we felt we could fix the proposal of affordable housing and to keep the cost relatively low for future investors. I texted into the show, I put across my proposal, and BBC Radio 2 decided to give me a call and ask me to contribute towards the conversation. This is how it went.
Adam is in Bedfordshire. Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. You own a mortgage company.
I do indeed.
Do you think we can, if we build affordable housing, we can keep it restricted to those most in need?
Yes, absolutely. And there is a specific way in which you would do it. A lot of people are still adhering to the rules of property that have been put in place for the last 20, 25 years. In particular, the main one that's just changed is the Right to Buy scheme, which only just changed from a huge discount that you would have received and owning the property for at least 7 years to now switching to this 10-year rule with only a limited amount of discount received by someone who's lived in that council property. And that hasn't worked in any capacity. The way in which you make it work is you have to make sure that there is a restriction on the title deed at the land registry that says that you cannot sell this property above a particular percentage. And that would give you one of two things. Firstly, the person who needs to buy the property, not necessarily in a desperate situation, but someone who really wants it, who's earned it, who's proven that they can be in that position to be able to buy it at an affordable price, because the value of the property is the value of the property, is what it is. You're not going to change it when it's built. But the increased value of the property has to be restricted. And if you do that on a particular patch, particular location, regions, all around the country, then what you are doing is making sure that these houses are maintained, sustained, affordable, and they cannot be sold to anyone who genuinely cannot afford it in 10 years' time.
Yeah, but hang on. How do you keep the price of the property down if, say, somebody wants to buy it and then immediately sell it on?
So you have restrictions that are in place. So, for instance, if you, this is just a different example, but if you buy a property and you have, let's say, solar panels on your roof, then there was an era, best part of 10 years ago, where you would have leased out your roof to a solar energy company who then would have rented that from you. And you cannot sell the property unless you got permission from that person or from that company. So you would put similar restrictions in place at the land registry, which meant that if the property sold over a particular value, then there would be a stop immediately to say you cannot sell the property for that much.
I see, thank you.
Apart from the quick cut-off right at the end, I wanted to give a bit more context in terms of what I was trying to suggest in this call. So firstly, where does the problem usually lie when it comes to affordable housing? Well, it lies with demand. If there isn't enough properties that are in a particular area and you have enough people who want to buy in that area, then the prices shoot up. Especially when you have people like landlords or serial investors who try to buy in a particular location, so they may own 3, 4, 5 properties in one particular location. It then means there's less for people to buy. So how do you fix this? My proposal was quite simple. You build, let's say, one property on one patch of land. That property may cost you £250,000 to build. What I was suggesting is that you put a restriction on that title. The land registry is a public register that registers any ownership of any land in the entirety of the UK. It is also where you can label any restrictions if you need to. A restriction on the title deed means that you cannot, as the owner of that property, do anything with the property, including transferring, selling, or anything until the conditions are fully met. So my proposal was, if you put a condition or a restriction on the title deeds that says that this particular property cannot increase beyond a particular percentage, it gives an opportunity for people who can only afford a particular price bracket to have an opportunity to always buy in a particular region. It keeps it very fair and it keeps it only specifically in that one particular region. It doesn't have any knock-on effect to any neighbouring streets because this would be restrictive to this particular type of property, this particular type of developer, and this particular type of street or address. Anything outside of that doesn't fall in line with the remit of that pricing system. So how do you do it? Well, let's say that it costs you £250,000 to build a house, for example. The person who built the house is going to want to make their money and they're going to make their profit on that £250,000. So let's say you sell the property for £260,000 and you make a small profit on it. Let's then assume that the family who choose to buy this property, who are in a position to do so, fall within a particular category that allows them to fall in this bracket of purchase. They have a 5% deposit. Let's say that deposit is £13,000. That means that they are in a position to be able to buy a property in a particular region with a deposit as little as 5%. Which in this example means that they're buying for £260,000, they have a deposit of £13,000, which means their mortgage is £247,000. But if they decide to move on or sell that property, there is a restriction in place that says that they cannot sell that property beyond a particular percentage from which they bought it. That restriction could be set at 5% every 10 years. Regardless of the scenario, it means it keeps the property affordable. To give you context, if the property cost them £260,000 initially to buy the property over a 10-year window, let's say that mortgage is now down to £190,000. They've been overpaying, they've been doing what they need to. What started off as £13,000 contribution now means that their equity just from repaying their mortgage is now £70,000. Let's assume that the property can only increase by 5% within that 10-year window. They still make money on their money. So if they're paying off the loan on the property, which then means their equity has grown from £13,000 initially to £70,000, that family then wants to move on and go and live somewhere else. They want to downsize, for example. They can put themselves in a position where they sell that property for nothing more than £273,000. So they're now selling the property for a £13,000 profit within a 10-year window. Let's then say that they put the property on the market and they sell the property for £273,000 with that restriction. The family that's been living there for 10 years has now got the best part of £80,000 to work with to go and buy elsewhere if they want to. Yes, inflation, everything else in between is going to change, but it then means that they're in a position to be able to decide whether to stay put and pay off that mortgage in full, or they end up being able to sell the property and move on to a different location because they want to, because they can do. But assuming they did sell the property and they only were able to sell the property for £273,000, and for the sake of this video, let's assume that the next people buying the property again only has access to a 5% deposit. The deposit for that family is then going to be £13,650. So it's not a massive jump in terms of the restriction of how that works. Now, I'm not saying this plan is perfect, but that is essentially how you fix affordable housing. Without the restriction in terms of the increased prospects, what you are doing is you are allowing serial investors and developers to buy a particular property, and that's what drives up the cost. So if you want to try and make sure that you keep in place an affordable housing scheme, there has to be a restriction on the title. It needs to be tweaked, it needs to be changed, but what it does is it eradicates any serial investors, it removes any landlords out of the equation, it removes any developers in that particular patch, and it only keeps it in situ for any person that qualifies for this particular type of property, this particular type of scheme, and allows people to make sure they maintain affordable housing in every region in the UK.